What's up, everybody? Patrick's back again. We're back with our parable series in Matthew, and today we're going to be continuing on with the parable of the yeast. And it's another short one today, so there's not a lot of reading, and nor is there a lot of terms, but it builds off our last video that we did with the parable of the mustard seed, and kind of how Kingdom of Heaven starts small, then it grows into something. This one we'll see it takes kind of time to work out that. So without further ado, as I always say, let's get into it. He told them still another parable, and this is Matthew 13, we're starting in 33. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all through the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. Alright, so that pretty much wraps up the parable for today. Quick note before we unpack this, Matthew, as he tends to do, likes to try and link Jesus back to the Old Testament here. And that particular, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things, Old Testament reference there is actually from Psalm 78. And I just want to take a quick minute to sort of unpack that real fast, because I would just encourage everybody to, when they see, as they're going through Matthew, go back and read the Old Testament references in context. I happen to believe that Jesus was not the Old Testament Messiah. It's part of the reason the Jews kind of reject him now, is they just don't see him in their Bible. And the reason for that is if you look back at a lot of the references Matthew makes, a lot of times they're taken out of context. For example, this Psalm 78 one is actually based on the history of the Jewish nation from Egypt, coming out of Egypt to David. So all that to say is just when you read the Bible and you see Old Testament references, or you see references to to previous scripture, go back and read it in context. Remember, these people didn't have a computer. They couldn't just go look up Deuteronomy 12:2 or whatever, on their laptop. They're kind of remembering from memory. A lot of them may have been illiterate, so they were fishermen. So I just say that to keep in mind. Go back and read stuff in context before you just take everything at face value. So with that, let's just move into the parable. So we see the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large amount of flour until it worked all the way through the dough. So let's talk about making bread in the ancient world. I'm not an expert in ancient world bread making, but I do know it wasn't like today where, we have like bread makers and, commercial ovens and stuff like that. Like, it was a very hand-driven process. They also don't know if they how they mass produce bread, if it was like a one at a time thing, or they just took like a huge lump of flour and made it all together. But in any case, to make bread, it was a very, like I said, it's a handmade process, like everything else back then, where you had to really work in and knead it through the flour and the water, and you need a yeasting agent or some sort of something to help it rise, normally yeast, which helps it rise and be fluffy and all that fun stuff. So the whole idea here, and it kind of builds off what we talked about last week with the mustard seed, where it takes time to grow the kingdom. Remember, the mustard seed starts small, and through a process of caring for it and watering it and giving all the things that a seed needs to grow, it grows into this magnificent tree that's beneficial and benefits things around it. So it has a positive impact when it is fully matured, if you will. The whole idea of this parable with working the yeast into the dough, let's unpack some terms real fast. This is a good time to do that. So what's the dough represent? Well, the dough represents, obviously, your heart. Always, when Jesus is telling a parable, he's talking about the heart. What does it have to do with that? You hear a parable, think about, what does it have to do with my heart, my internal being? Just think that immediately. Then the yeast, he says, it represents, the kingdom of heaven. Last time we said the mustard seed represents the little truth, that gets into you. The yeast is the same way. The difference in this parable is Jesus is making a point that it takes time to work that into you. It's not this one and done thing. It's not this me and my buddy John always make fun of, this magic Jesus download where you just get it all of a sudden. It takes time of working it into who you are. The yeast and the flour, they combine together to make bread. So that's kind of the image right there. Is it becomes a part of who you are. And I'm repeating myself a lot because that idea is the most important thing. Is you need to become it. You need to become like Jesus, basically. That way you're not acting it. You're not pretending to be something you're not. It just flows naturally out of you. So what does that kind of look like? Well, again, going back to the time thing, it just takes processing. It takes being in a, I guess, discipleship role with somebody, or I guess a more modern term would that be like a mentor or teacher relationship with somebody, someone who knows more than you to learn and grow from, whoever that is. And then also start trying to apply the little truths that you're getting. I'm gonna I am bouncing back and forth between the mustard seed and this because they play off of each other, and that's, I don't know if Matthew wrote it like that, or that's how I remembered it, or maybe that's just, maybe Jesus told it this way because for effect. I'm not sure, but basically these things play off of each other. It's like these are the small truths that you get, and then you need to work them out and start applying them and working them into who you are. So for example of that, like me, I was very much a perfectionist. Everything had to be perfect in my life. I always had to make sure all my ducks were in a row, at least to what everybody saw. Like, and then on, you know, the inside, and when I was alone and the stuff I was doing wrong, like it just, I was very hard on myself. So what it took for me is many nights of coming home and just reflecting on my day in a positive way, and verbalizing at the first point of it, saying today couldn't be any different, and I did the best I could in every situation today, and just really reflecting on each situation that I could remember, and just saying I couldn't be different, and it's okay to feel any emotions that I'm feeling. It's okay to feel even some of the negative emotions I'm feeling, and really start in small, like baby steps, applying these little truths. And that's, if you ever see a video of like kneading dough, it's that process of beginning to knead the dough, and it actually doesn't even start with that. You get a lump of flour and add some water to it, and you start mixing it up, and that's where I was. You just, those little baby steps of applying truth and applying it to your being, and every day you just keep doing that, and a little more and a little more and a little more. And then I would meet with my mentor at the time, and we talk about life, we talk about what's working, what's not working, and I encourage everybody to find somebody that, to get into some sort of, you know, mentor-student relationship like that, so that you can talk about what's going on. I mean, be careful about who it is. You don't want to open up to everybody, because there are people who are going to take advantage of you out there, unfortunately. But find someone that you can trust and talk about and say, I'm dealing with this, and do you have any advice, and this is what's working and this is what isn't working, and let's talk about those things. And slowly but surely, as you work that yeast through your dough, you work those truths into your heart to where those truths become a part of you. And they became a part of me, and I no longer have those feelings of I need to be perfect. I'm okay with the things I screw up with, because I'm working towards an answer so I don't screw up with them again. And that's that process that happens. And so that's why these two play off of each other. Like growing your kingdom, to wrap up these two parables before we move on to the next one, is just it takes time. They start small, and as I mentioned last time, like you just got to respect the process, and you got to be willing to put in at least a little bit of effort. I'm not saying you do works to gain your salvation. You don't earn it by any means, because they have to be given to you, but you do have to do something in order to apply them to your life, and in order to become, so that they become a part of you and a part of who you are. There's a lot of, I think, need to have it right now. You know, I just need it. I'm not wearing it right now, but I have an Apple Watch, and I get updates immediately of anything I want. If I need to check something further, it's on my phone. As I mentioned earlier in the video, if I ever need to look up a Bible verse or want to research something or whatever, like it's at my fingertips. Like I've got a laptop, I've got, all these things, instant access, and it just, those are great. I'm not saying those are bad, but it's created somewhat of a give it to me now. I don't want to work for it. I want now service in our lives. Whereas I think back in the ancient times, like they somewhat better understood the value of working towards something and putting time and effort into something to see it come to fruition. So, in any case, that pretty much wraps up this parable. As always, guys, I appreciate you stopping by and making time to watch these videos. And to those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, I pray you be blessed in all that you do. See you later, everybody.